Hey guys, this is Pastor Caleb, and welcome to our new Thursday night series as we get into answers for some of life's more difficult questions. On Thursday nights, we're going to be starting a series here with Professor or Dr. Sean McDowell. We got his permission. He is an apologetics professor over at Biola. Some of you guys might know his dad, Josh McDowell, who wrote a really famous book. Um, Sean has been putting out content weekly for a long time, and I have just been a great fan of some of the discussions, the guests, the people that he brings on, because I feel like he really is trying to equip us, the church, with resources for how we can engage in the world. August, we're going to do a Thursday night series where each week we're going to put out one of these discussions or interviews that he's done and try to equip you so that we can be salt and light, so that we can be ready to give an answer to the hope that we have. I hope that you're blessed. I hope that you enjoy these on Thursday nights, and then we can follow up if you have questions, if you have prayer requests. You can always text the church, 714-879-3314. We'll also include a link to Sean's YouTube channel where you can find hundreds of videos on everything from how to share your faith to topics like these to a whole bunch of different resources that he has there on his channel. Again, we hope that you're blessed. We hope that you enjoy this, and we hope that you'll join us on Sunday mornings at 10 and 12 as we continue to unfold God's word to answer life's most difficult questions. All right.
Why would an award-winning Planned Parenthood clinic director suddenly stop and become a pro-life activist? Our guest today is Abby Johnson, one of the most outspoken pro-life advocates today. While her story is portrayed in the 2019 film Unplanned, she's here to give us more of the backstory.
A movie that would help bring redemption for women who have had abortions, who feel like their voices have been silenced.
And update us on how the pro-life movement is doing today and what it must do to pivot and be successful now 3 years after the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Thanks for coming on.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Well, many people want to know why you left Planned Parenthood because of what you describe as, quote, the day that changed everything. But I'm equally interested in how you first came to think that working there was genuinely helping women and society. So if you don't mind, let's go to some of the backstory there and maybe start with your family. What was your upbringing like? Were they religious? Were they pro-life, pro-choice?
Yeah. So I grew up in a Christian home, Southern Baptist through and through. Great parents, have amazing parents. They've been married for almost 50 years. Just, you know, I think it was a different time in the world. It was a different time in culture. People were not standing up on podiums and shouting their abortion. People were not walking around in t-shirts that said I've had an abortion. So, my parents, they were, against abortion. They were pro-life, but it was not something that we discussed in the home. We didn't really talk about hard subjects. I think my parents just thought, we've taught Abby the biblical pathway to marriage. And so as long as she follows that, then we don't really ever need to talk about abortion. We don't need to talk about those really hard things. And I think in a way they thought, we go to church, we do church, right? And so if there are really hard things that need to be discussed, then the church will handle it. And the church thought, well, these are really involved parents of our youth group. And so if there are really hard things, then the parents are going to talk about it. And so nobody was talking about these really hard things. And I, went to college just very, very ill-equipped for the real world, for living in the world. And I was, walking through my college campus. I went to Texas A&M University, one of the largest universities in the country. Supposed to be a very conservative campus, and I mean, relatively, when you compare it to other universities, secular universities, it is. It
Sure.
is comparatively a conservative campus, but Planned Parenthood and its cohorts, they are on just about every college campus. And they were there on Texas A&M's campus, and they had a hot pink booth there. And my favorite color is hot pink. And so it captured my attention. I walked over there and asked who they were, what they were about. I think that was probably the first time I'd ever even heard the name Planned Parenthood before. I didn't grow up. I grew up
Mm.
in South Louisiana, grew up in a small town, did not grow up knowing about Planned Parenthood, did not grow up. There was not a Planned Parenthood in my community. We didn't talk about Planned Parenthood. My parents did not go to March for Life rallies or, they were not pro-life activists in any way, shape, or form. We didn't have a pregnancy center in my community. Just a different time. And so, certainly people were committing abortions, people were having abortions, but they were quiet about it. It was a time where, sin was still coupled with shame. People were not proud of their sinfulness. People are very proud of their sin nowadays. So proud that they created a flag for it. So, people were private, and people were private about their sin. And so when I encountered Planned Parenthood, when I encountered this woman who was working for Planned Parenthood, trying to recruit volunteers and clients and eventually staff, she sold me on the idea that Planned Parenthood was there to help women, to help young women, to help poor women. And I mean, everybody wants to help women. Who doesn't want to help women? I mean, everybody wants to help women. And I do remember her specifically asking me about abortion, what I thought about abortion. And, I said, well, I was raised pro-life. And she said, well, that's great. She said, pro-lifers, they're good people. They're just misguided. They just don't see the big picture. They don't understand that without access to safe and legal abortion, women are going to be forced to go to these back alley clinics. That was the first time I'd ever even heard of a back alley clinic or anything similar. Sounded dangerous. Sounded like something that would harm women. And I remember her talking about, being a feminist and feminism. I didn't know what that was, but it's, it sounded like something my parents wouldn't like. So I thought, I want to be that. And that was kind of it. I mean, I think I was at this stage in my life where I wanted to be rebellious. I was trying to find my own identity away from my parents. And
Yep.
that is what Planned Parenthood was offering me, was an opportunity to be a bright, enlightened young woman and to kind of step into to my own identity as a feminist, as an educated, smart, intelligent feminist. And so I did. And I ended up signing up and started volunteering immediately.
So tell me if this is fair. Grow up in a probably typical Southern Baptist home, parents who love you, went to church, get to college, and you're away from home trying to find yourself. A little bit of a natural rebellious college age, spirit that I understand. Meet people with cool colors and they don't attack your family, but just say, oh, they're well-meaning but misguided. We can show you how to do something significant. So it's really less like, here's the evidence for a pro-choice argument into it, but just appealing to a sense of belonging, appealing to a sense of purpose, giving you community something to live for at that stage in your life. That's really how you became pro-choice, more than thinking about what abortion is. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, yeah, 100%. I didn't really think about abortion at all.
Hmm.
I didn't even consider myself pro-choice when I went to volunteer at Planned Parenthood the first time. I remember going for the first time to Planned Parenthood, and it was the first time I had lived in this community for several years, going to college there, but I'd never driven by the Planned Parenthood building. Because I stayed, around the university, and the Planned Parenthood building it was not super close to the university. So I just didn't drive in that part of town that often. And so, I had to I had to map quest, directions to get to the Planned Parenthood. Some people listening won't even know what MapQuest is, but anyway, I had to print out the directions to
Yep.
get there, and I drove there and immediately saw this big black iron fence that was in front of the building that separated the building parking lot from the sidewalk, and there were a bunch of people standing outside, and that's how I knew where it was. Really, before I even saw the Planned Parenthood sign, I saw all the people outside and had been told there would be protesters outside, and so that I immediately knew that I'm going to the right place. And I wonder sometimes about that first day, if my first day would have gone differently had the scene outside been different. Because I drove in, parked my car, got out. It was so silly. It was such a silly encounter that first day. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I was dressed up. I was like wearing church clothes. I was like wearing a nice blouse and heels and like dress pants, because I didn't know what I was going to do that day. I didn't realize I was going to be, in the hot sun, walking women from their car to the front door to get their abortions, trying to shield them from the people
Ooh.
on the sidewalk. I didn't realize that was what I was going to be doing when I signed up to volunteer. I thought I was going to be working like in the clinic. So I had dressed up really nice, because I thought I was going to be working like in the office. And so here I am in this dressy clothes and heels, and I'm, walking women from their car to the front door. And I remember that first day just thinking, right when I got there, why are we doing this? Because if there's people out here trying to give them information, alternatives to having an abortion, well, if we're pro-choice, then why do we care if they take the information and leave? Like, why do we care if they take the information and make a different choice? Like, who cares? We're pro-choice, right?
Ah.
But then I hear the things that a group is saying to the women coming in. And there's a man dressed up like the Grim Reaper. And there's a group there, and they are, quite literally yelling, you're a murderer. If you would have kept your legs closed, this wouldn't be happening. They have, all these bloody signs, very aggressive. And so I thought, oh, well, this is why we're here. right? Because we're trying to protect these women from this very aggressive group of people. Now, it was a small group of people, but they were very loud, which that's how society works, right? Very
It's
small
true.
group of people make the most noise.
True.
There were two very distinct groups of people there. There were people there that were quietly praying, some quietly praying a rosary, some reading the Bible, some, reading out of a prayer book, whatever, quietly. Those people were trying to gently reach out, offering pamphlets, but those were being you couldn't even hear them because of this smaller group of people that were yelling out and screaming and dressed in costumes and doing all of this weird stuff over here. And so that made me feel very protective of the women. This is why we're kind of coming in as the savior, right? To protect these women from these
Oof.
crazy people. And I wonder sometimes, if that group of people hadn't have been there, would I have ever even returned? Because I think there was something in me that was just saying, like, why do we even need to be here in the first place? And I really did feel that until I heard that group of people start yelling out. And I think if they wouldn't have been there that day, I'm not sure I would have returned, because I didn't really understand, like, what's the big deal if they take something from this group of people and leave? That's what being pro-choice is about, letting women make their own choice. But I suddenly did feel very protective of the women, and I did want to hurry them into the building to get them away from this raucous crowd that was over to the side. And that was kind of it. Once I was in, once I felt that protectiveness of the women, I felt like I am helping women. This is what I should be doing. This is what I ought to be doing. And I kept coming back day after day, as a volunteer. And once I graduated college, they hired me on to actually work in the clinic. And I think, the Bible talks about God putting before you opportunities to choose life and death. And of course, we are to choose life. And I think from very early moments into my time at Planned Parenthood, God was putting those opportunities before me. Those sort of crossroad moments where, he was presenting that option to me, choose life or death. And I think every time we choose death over life, and not, I mean, of course, not always like physical death in life, right? But I mean, goodness and wickedness, right? Jesus and Satan, like what are you choosing, right? I think every time we choose wickedness, every time we choose evil over Christ, I think there is a hardness that comes over our heart. There is some sort of callousness that takes over our heart. And when that happens, it gets harder to hear from God. It gets harder to feel his presence. And you don't want to, because you are now cooperating with evil. And the desire to cooperate with evil, it grows and it gets easier to do so. And that was really what happened to me. And there's so many times in my life where I remember those moments clearly, where I thought, this is a moment where God presented me an opportunity to choose life over death. But I didn't have the courage to say, this is wrong. I should not be doing this. I should run out the back door and flee from this evil. I should not cooperate in this. I did not have the courage to do it. And so I chose evil. I
Mm.
chose death. And then another callus forms over your heart. And when
Mm.
you do that for so many years, you really do become numb
Mhm.
to what you're doing every single day.
So let's personalize this. In the film, there's one of the scenes that really stood out to me is a girl is walking in and her mom, which would be the grandma of this child,
Mhm.
is outside. And I just had never thought about it or visualized it that way. And it like moved me to tears. I mean, this grandma is doing everything to save the life of her grandchild, and her daughter just refuses to do so. Take us to what you would do when a girl would come up and she's obviously torn and conflicted. People are yelling a lot of time. What would you say, and how would you get them in the door to make sure they had an abortion?
Well, that was a real scenario that happened. That really did happen. That was an interesting thing. I remember the woman calling and asking, if we had a back door or something. We really didn't. We didn't have a back entrance. Everything was kind of right up front. And we were like, just park close to the door, park close to the building. We'll get you in as quickly as possible. Of course, she didn't. She parked right up next to the fence. Um, and I remember, her mom just, and it was several of her family members that were out there, and people from their church out there. And it was just a very, I was a mother at that time. So I'd already had my daughter by that time. She was young, but I just remember it being a very sobering reminder of what we were doing. That this was not just affecting the woman who was having an abortion, but that this really was affecting the entire family. And there have been several things. It was kind of one of the things that had happened. One thing that was not in the film, but is in the book, Unplanned, that had also happened kind of in that same time period, was we had a religious sister, a nun, come out to the clinic one day. It was the first time I'd ever seen a nun in real life. Like, I'd seen it in the movies, right? But I'd never seen one in
Interesting.
real life.
Huh.
And it was so hot that day. It was like 100 degrees outside. And there she was in her full habit. And I just thought, oh my gosh, her face was so red. She was so hot. She had to be so hot. And I just kept watching her out the window. We were doing abortions that day. And I kept going to the window and watching her out the window, almost like checking on her. Like, is she still okay? Is she fainted from the heat? And our first abortion patient drove out of the driveway for the day. And I remember watching that sister. Her name was Sister Marie Bernadette. I got to know her after I left. I watched her just crumple. I mean, just fall to her knees, and she was weeping. And it broke my heart, because I thought, oh my gosh, she is feeling a pain that I don't feel. And I'm standing here in the clinic witnessing this happen. And I kind of thought at that time, like, how numb am I to this? She's out there, just watching people drive off, knowing what happened. And she's feeling this immense pain. And I'm standing here participating in it, and I feel nothing. That was kind of like a stark realization, I think, for me, of just how callous I had become. But to your question, I mean, if a woman came and was, nervous about coming in or something, we would just talk to them about nothing. I mean, just be like, okay, come on in, you're going to be fine. We'll get you in really quick. And don't even look at them. Don't worry about it. They're just trying to take away your rights, just get in here, oh, look at the weather. The weather's so pretty today. I mean, just talk to them about nonsense just to kind of take their mind. And you just always keep your mouth going, right? Like always keep talking to try to distract them from what they were saying on the other side of the fence. Eventually, as I worked there, it used to just be like a fence, and they could still, put their hand through and give pamphlets and all this kind of stuff. And that would not do. So we ended up putting this like metal mesh over the fence so that they would not be able to stick their hand through and give pamphlets. We did everything we could to prevent women from making a choice. We did everything we could to essentially take away a woman's choice, so that when they came to the clinic, if they were thinking, I'm going to have an abortion, we wanted them to keep thinking that way, so that their mind would not be pulled into a different direction. And whether that was shielding them with an umbrella so that they couldn't even see the people out there, whether it was talking really loud to try to talk over so that they couldn't hear what they were saying, putting up a mesh screen so that they couldn't hand them pamphlet, whatever it was, we were going to do it to get them into the clinic. And once they were in the clinic, if there was even a doubt, if a woman was like, I don't know, maybe I could do this, maybe I could, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have an abortion, immediately we were taught how to wreck their plan of parenthood. So we were taught, how to say things like, but daycare is so expensive. How are you going to, you only make this much an hour. Let's calculate that out. I mean, half of your paycheck is going to go to daycare. And, doesn't sound like you have a whole lot of support, and doesn't sound like the dad really supports you having a baby. So what's that going to be like? And it's really hard to be a single mom. And I mean, we were so good at exploiting a vulnerable situation. And just making it seem impossible. Helping the women understand that whatever they thought they could do, they can't. And it's the opposite of what the abortion industry says they are there to do. It's the opposite of doing what the feminist movement says they are there to do, which is to empower women, to support women, to tell women that they can, right? But really what we were doing all the time was telling women that they can't, that they're unable, that they're weak. And that's why women have abortions. Women have abortions at the weakest moment of their life. They have abortions at when they feel the weakest. They don't have abortions because they feel strong. They don't have abortions because they feel empowered. They have abortions because they feel weak. And then, enter the abortion industry that takes that moment of weakness and exploits it around every turn. And they are professionals at it. I was so good at it, they gave me an award.
Wow. That's amazing. Abby, we're going to come to what you call, quote, the day that changed everything. But I just have to draw out the irony of me listening to you describe this. A position that is pro-choice did everything to talk women out of choice. An organization called Planned Parenthood did everything to wreck a woman's plan for parenthood at their most vulnerable spot. That alone is worth just reflecting on, so I've just got to highlight it. But you said something earlier. This is the last question before we get to everything changing for you. You said you were a mom at the time you were you were the director of a Planned Parenthood clinic. And there is a scene again in the movie. I haven't read the book, but where they have this birthday party for a mom who's pregnant, and it's just meant to show the irony and profound contradiction of celebrating life in the same place you're ending life. Did that contradiction or tension occur to you, or is it later looking back, you're like, oh my goodness?
I would like to tell you I was really like, this is crazy that they're throwing me a baby shower after we just killed 40 babies. But it didn't. I mean, that's how messed up like my mind was at the time. I was pregnant with my daughter. We had committed about 40 abortions that day, and they threw a surprise baby shower for me at the end of our surgical abortion day. And nobody thought anything about it. I mean, it was just, and I remember one time walking by, we had to park offsite on days that we committed surgical abortions because our parking lot would get very full. And so we had to walk by the people on the sidewalk. And I was very heavy pregnant one day when I walked by. And one of the prayer warriors said, how can you do this when you're so big pregnant? Like, how can you do this? And I remember, I mean, just like it was yesterday, I remember turning around and it was a man. I looked him in the face and I said, I have had 3 pregnancies. 2, I chose to have an abortion. This one, I have chosen to carry to term. It's just that simple. And I just turned around and I walked in the door. And it was just in my mind that simple for me at the time. I did not think about the 2 children that I had murdered. I did not care about them. I did not care about those decisions I had made. I did not think about them at all, except when I used them to convince other Christian women that abortion was fine, that abortion was an acceptable choice for Christian women. Because I was a Christian and I had 2 abortions. So if I had done it, it's fine for you to do it. That was the only time I ever even brought up my other 2 abortions. And it wasn't to grieve the loss of the children that had been murdered. It was to, again, exploit the 2 children that had been murdered by abortion to help other women feel like their abortions were justified.
Thanks for sharing that. Let's go to the day, September 26th, 2009. Quote, the day that changed everything. What happened? Why did it change?
So abortions are typically done in a blind manner. The doctor has the suction tube. He just blindly pokes around inside of a woman's uterus until he thinks he has enough blood and tissue in a glass jar. That glass jar goes into a lab called the POC lab. POC stands for products of conception. Of course, the products of conception, that's the baby. But you don't say baby inside of an abortion clinic.
Of course.
And so the POC technician is the person that takes all of the pieces that have been suctioned out. They reassemble the body of the baby to ensure that there are 2 arms, 2 legs, head, and torso that have been retrieved from the uterus. If we left part of the baby in the woman's uterus, she could develop a very serious infection, and she could become septic, which could be fatal to a woman. So I knew abortions were done. I had worked in the POC lab. I knew how all that was done. I counted the parts. I didn't think there was anything at that point working in the abortion industry. I didn't think there was anything that could shock me, that could change my mind, anything like that. I was pretty desensitized to abortion. But we had a visiting physician come in from out of town. He had his own practice. He explained to me that that at his own private practice, he only used he only did ultrasound guided abortions. So he used an ultrasound during the entire abortion procedure, which was different. We did use an ultrasound, but only before the abortion began. We wanted to determine how far along the woman was in her pregnancy so that we knew how much to charge her for the abortion. And then the ultrasound was rolled away and it was not used again. So this doctor, though, was telling me it was safer for the woman, of course, because he could see what he was doing while he was performing surgery on the woman. That made sense to me. I asked my supervisor why this wasn't the standard procedure, if it was safer for women. She explained to me that it was safer for women, but using an ultrasound during the abortion took about an extra 3 to 5 minutes of time per patient. And when you're trying to do, anywhere from 40 to 50 abortions in a day, you just don't have that kind of extra time per patient. So I accepted that answer. I was called in, though, to assist by this doctor, and my job was to hold the ultrasound probe in place during this abortion. I did the ultrasound. We found that the woman was 13 weeks pregnant. At 13 weeks along, everything is fully formed in a woman's uterus: arms, legs, fingers, toes, eyes. Heart's been beating since 21 days post-conception. Brain waves are active. Every internal organ that we sit here with today is formed on a child by 12 weeks gestation. So I was standing there looking at this ultrasound, and for the first time, and this sounds crazy, I know, but for the first time, looking at this child in the womb and wondering, what am I about to see here? I'm looking at the full profile of this child from head to foot and wondering, am I going to see this child die? Like, what is this going to look like for me to see a child die? But then thinking, well, it's not a child. It's a fetus. But then thinking, okay, but Grace, my daughter, she was a child to me when she was this age. And trying to kind of make it make sense in my head for the first time. And, thinking back to that ultrasound that I had with Grace and looking at this ultrasound and feeling very apprehensive. I was feeling very apprehensive about what I was going to be watching. And I was trying to convince myself that this 13-week-old fetus was not going to feel anything. No matter what I saw, this 13-week-old fetus was not going to feel anything. And because that's what I've been taught, and that's what I told women. That's what I had been telling them for the past 8 years. And I saw the suction tube go into the woman's uterus, and it was getting closer and closer to his body. When it finally touched him, he jumped And it appeared that he was trying to move away from the suction tube. And the doctor asked the technician to turn on the suction machine. The suction was turned on. And I watched this tiny human being be torn apart inside of his mother's womb. And I was shocked at what I saw. I was, I was horrified. I can't say that it wasn't like it was in the movie. I didn't run out of the room and go into the bathroom and cry. It wasn't that. I felt very stupid. I felt very ashamed that I had been involved in this for so long. I'm not a dumb person, but I felt like I had been very dumb for believing this lie for so long. And I wasn't a victim. I had eagerly believed it for, I don't know what, money. I made a lot of money for notoriety. I don't know. I met a lot of famous people, sat at tables with politicians and people like Hillary Clinton, and got to shake hands with a lot of famous people. And I was young. I was the youngest Planned Parenthood clinic director. I was winning a lot of awards. And I think that was driving me, really. It was the money and these accomplishments that they kept throwing at me, and I just thought, what have I been doing? Look at what I've been doing. I'm seeing now what I've been doing. And I think that was the first time that I really understood that I had been saying things like, oh, it's choice, but there wasn't any choice in the room that day. Certainly the child did not get a choice that day. And we had said all these slogans, like abortion is reproductive justice, but there was no justice there. We called abortion healthcare, but it wasn't healthcare. The healthcare is to heal, not to kill. And it was the first time I really realized that abortion was the intentional killing of an innocent human being. And I knew there was a word for that, and that was murder. And it was such a shock to my system to then have to reconcile what I had done, because then that has to sit with you, right? Like I have participated in murder. I have not only murdered two of my own children, but I had to kind of open up, what have I done? I always say you can't heal from what you don't know. And so I had to look at what had I done. I had been an accomplice to over 22,000 abortions, which meant I had been an accomplice to over 22,000 murders. And I thought, how do I even begin to heal from that? There's no books on that. Nobody had written a book about that. No pregnancy center had a Bible study on how to heal from killing other people's children.
Yeah.
Um, it was very foreign territory. Nobody had explored it. I felt very alone. It was a very dark time in my life, and I felt so much shame.
Mm.
And I really just wanted to go away. I didn't want anybody to know what I had been a part of. I didn't want anybody to know about what I had done. I did not want anyone to know. Um, did not want to share my story publicly at all, ever. Um, I have my degrees are in counseling and therapy, so I thought, well, that's fine. I have that's what I'll do. I'll just go and you know open up a. I'll just go work with a counseling center, and I'll just be a counselor, and I'll just put this chapter behind me. Um, but that's not what happened. Planned Parenthood, once they found out that I no longer supported their mission, they sued me. And when they sued me, they sent out a press release to the Associated Press. And that is what became a national news headline, surprisingly. I didn't think anybody would care that a Planned Parenthood director quit their job, but the media does care when someone quits their job and then that corporation tries to get a gag order against them, because the media then wants to know what does she know that you don't want us to know.
Exactly.
And I knew a lot, and they wanted to keep that quiet, which was hilarious because I never had any intention of telling anyone what I had done or what I had experienced or what I had seen, because that implicated me. And so I never wanted to tell anyone anything. But when they sued me, it really kind of forced my hand. And it was almost like God was kind of rolling out the red carpet, like, okay, like I've taken you through this, I've taken you out of this, and um, now you're going to do something that glorifies me.
Mm.
And it was hard. It's been a hard journey. I've been out of the industry for 15 years. Um, I don't know that it's gotten easier over the past 15 years.
Mm.
Honestly, I tell people healing is a journey. It's not a destination.
Mm.
Um, you know, living with the burden of working in the abortion industry, it's an earthly consequence for our sin. Um, yes, we know that Jesus has forgiven us. Yes, we know that Jesus loves us. Yes, we know all of those things. We accept it. We all of that. We know God is good. We know those things. Um, but uh, there's just some things that we'll just live with
Mm.
for the rest of our lives. Um, little things, you know. I don't know. About a year ago, I got a package. Someone had sent me a gift, and it was some steaks from Omaha Steak. And I got the package and opened it up, and the steaks were in dry ice. And I opened up the styrofoam container, and when I opened it up, there was like steam, from the dry ice that came out. And I immediately had a flashback
Mm.
to uh, to opening up the container of aborted baby parts, and I just had a panic attack right there in my kitchen on the floor. Those are the sorts of things that I'll live with for the rest of my life.
Mm.
I was making a pot roast for my dinner for my family um, about a few months ago, and was cutting up meat, raw meat, and had a panic attack.
Mm.
Um, women in our ministry, and then there were none. We help other clinic workers come out of the industry and come into relationship with Christ. They can't eat things like strawberry shortcake because it looks like blood. There's just little things in our lives that a lot of people just wouldn't understand, and they would think that's silly. That's just get over it, right? But you can't get over being an accomplice to murder. You can't just get over it. And so I think as we heal, myself and these other, 750 former abortion workers now that are part of our ministry, one of our goals is to be a voice and to help people understand that there is a human cost to abortion. Yes, of course, the baby is that very tangible human cost, but there's also a human cost to the mother. She will never be the same. After a woman takes a life of her own child, she will never be the same. I don't care what kind of act she puts on or whatever. Her life has changed. And there's a very real human cost to the people who work in these clinics. It's not normal to piece babies' body parts back together. It's not normal to do that job. And there's a very real cost to that as well. And so helping people understand that, in our ministry, we found there's a 38% suicidal ideation rate after leaving the abortion industry. That's not normal. 18% of former abortion workers attempt suicide. That's not normal. So we're trying to help people understand. Quite honestly, we're trying to bring a stigma back to abortion. We're trying to help people understand it's not normal to kill your child. It's not normal to help other women kill their children. And trying to bring some shame back into the scenario when we talk about abortion. Shame should be coupled with abortion. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to do. It should be shameful to have an abortion. It should be shameful to work inside of a place that murders children. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do by telling our stories. And I think we do it well by explaining what the real cost of abortion is.
Well, you are doing it well. Thanks for your vulnerability on that. It's easy to see the movie or hear your story and think, well, that was an episode in the past and everything's fine now. I think that made vivid some of the scars that remained. And you helped reframe a question I had for you, because one of the scenes that is just most powerful to me in the movie is when, of course, it's being fictionalized, but the character who's playing you wakes up in the middle of the night and is out by the couch. And the husband's like, where is she? And just finds her in tears. And it's like the realization of the weight of the sin just overwhelms her. And I had a couple thoughts about that. Number one, I know I can't fully feel that, not being a woman, not being a former abortion worker, but that brought me to at least a level of like, oh my goodness, I think I can relate to this more deeply. But I also thought sometimes in movies, there's a wooden, I don't know if for lack of a better term, cheesy like gospel presentation that's forced. It felt to me like this would have been a completely natural place to bring in who Jesus is and what he did. If I remember, it was more kind of God in the abstract rather than Jesus. I don't know if it went down that way. I don't know if the point is that this is an ongoing journey for you, but I'm curious why they didn't say, and like I would assume in your life, clearly what Jesus did and who he is. Apart from that, it's impossible to make sense of any sin or the background here Tell me just a little bit more about that, if you will.
So, I mean, most of the people who work in abortion clinics have some sort of faith foundation, which is surprising for people to hear.
Mm.
Almost everybody that I worked with would tell you they are a Christian.
Wow.
Almost everybody that comes through our ministry has grown up in the church. So, they don't really, when they feel this burden, it would be weird to look at them and say, but Jesus died on the cross for you. And to give them like the ABCs of salvation, right?
Sure.
Because they already know, like,
Mm.
they know Jesus. They know who he is. They've grown up with that knowledge. They've grown up with that faith. It's hard to comprehend the mercy of God for them. It's very hard to understand how God can forgive sins so great.
Mm.
It's not that you don't know God. It's not that you don't know that Jesus died on the cross for you. It's not that you don't know that we can bring our sins to Jesus. It's not, you know that. You know it. Every worker that's come through, and then there were none, has an understanding. Almost all of them have some sort of understanding of the gospel. They understand Jesus. They understand what he did. They understand the salvation, right? They understand that story. They understand who Jesus is. They just have such a hard time. We have a worker that helped to facilitate over 300,000 abortions. She worked there for 18 years. It's really hard to wrap your head around. It's easy to be like, well, okay, well, yeah, I stole some socks from Walmart. Like, I understand Jesus can forgive that. But how can Jesus forgive
Mm.
me for helping to commit 380,000 abortions? How is his mercy that great? That's something that's really hard to comprehend. And if I'm honest, it's really hard for people who haven't worked in the abortion industry to comprehend that.
Mm.
I mean, I think one of the hardest parts of leaving the abortion industry has been dealing with other Christians, with the unforgiveness of other Christians. That's been the hardest part of my journey. The hardest part of my journey has been Christians saying to me, I don't know how you live with yourself every day. I don't know how you, I don't know how you could ever think God could forgive you of what you've done. I don't know why you think there's salvation for someone like you. God could never forgive you of murdering these children. That's actually been the hardest part of this journey. And that's, my answer is always kind of the same, because I hear this from at least one person every 2 weeks, probably, is a Christian will say to me, I don't know how you could sin the way that you did.
Oh, gosh.
And, my answer is always the same back to them. I don't know how you sin the way that you do.
Mm.
All of our sin is despicable in the eyes of God.
Mm.
All of our sin separates us from God. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know how I did it either. That's what sin is. It's a separation from God. And we all do it. and we're all held accountable for it, no matter the sin. And but there's so much. I mean, that was one of the reasons why I started the ministry that I started. That's one of the reasons I started, and then there were none, was because there was no safe place in this movement for people who had worked in the abortion industry. It was full of this movement was full of just vile hatred for people who had worked in abortion clinics. And I felt like I was strong enough to, most of the time I was strong enough to take it. I was strong enough to kind of handle the pile-on, but many of these workers were not. And we lost one of our own sisters, and then there were none, to suicide because of it. She couldn't take it. And that shouldn't be. We should be a movement of people who welcome conversion. We should be a group of people we should be a movement of people, because we are a movement of people who have experienced conversion. I mean, that's what's so crazy about the pro-life movement. I find, as I travel around and talk to people, we are a movement of people. I find the majority of the pro-life movement are people who have had abortions, who at one point in time believed in abortion, who are pro-choice, who paid for a woman to have an abortion, who accompanied a woman to have an abortion, their girlfriend had an abortion. I mean, the conversion door generally swings one way, and it's from death to life. You're not going to find very many people who at one time were staunchly pro-life that are now staunchly pro-death. The conversion door doesn't usually swing that way. It's usually a one-way door, right? So how can we be a people who say we believe in God's mercy, we believe in the Bible, we believe in Paul's conversion, we believe in the Saul to Paul conversion, we believe in King David's conversion, we believe in all these conversions in the Bible, but we don't believe in the conversion of someone who worked in the abortion industry who has now been set free? How can we be those people? And so that was really why I started this ministry, so that we could be a soft landing place for people who have now said, I no longer want to cooperate with evil. I want to flee that evil, but had nowhere to go in this movement. And I hear it. I mean, honestly, I hear it pretty much almost everywhere I go, almost every event I go to. Someone in the crowd will come up to me and say something like, I don't know how you live with yourself. I don't know how you sin the way you do. I don't know how you go to sleep every night not thinking about the cries of these children that you helped to murder. Something very harsh like that. And so trying to reframe the mercy of God and helping people understand the infinite mercy of God is really has become part of my witness. To help people understand that I stand proudly as a daughter of the King, that I stand proudly as someone who, yes, lives with the scars of what I have done, but I stand as a woman who is worthy of redemption, as someone who is redeemed, as someone who was just like you, created in the likeness and image of God. And that we both sin, that we both fall down, but we both get up and we both continue to run to the Father.
That surprises me and saddens me that you hear that so consistently. I can't believe a Christian would honestly say that. I mean, if you're a Christian, like, and you've said that, like, stop and just repent. the gospel is that Jesus forgives all of us, not like, 80% of us and those who've done really bad sins. I mean, that is a false gospel, and we need to stop. So I'm sorry that you go through that. Thanks for continuing to share your story. Amidst that, it'd probably be easier not to. Looks like you were gonna add something.
No, I was just gonna say it would be easier not to, but honestly, like, I feel very blessed and honored that God has called me into this space. And I feel, uh, you know, there in the beginning, it was very hard. In the beginning, it felt very, I felt like, why, God? Why did you, why did you ask me to do this? But seeing people be freed from the bondage of a past abortion or working in the abortion clinic, um, man, it's like witnessing a miracle. And I feel like even honestly, I had a man. I was talking about people dressing up at the clinics. Um, one of the men who was really awful outside of my own abortion clinic when I worked there came up to me several years ago, and he said, I need to apologize to you. And I knew him because I mean, he was one of the really, you know, uh, ugly people that was out there when I worked there. And he came to me and said, I need to really apologize to you. And I've already repented to the Lord for how I treated you and the women going in and the other workers. And he said, I know that I was not honoring God with the things that I said and the way I behaved. And he said, apologizing to you is like the final piece of like making amends and what God is calling me to do. And he is now just a faithful, peaceful prayer warrior on the sidewalk.
Love it.
And so, God makes all things new. And so there's never a time where, there's never a time where we say, well, I've done too much bad, I can't go back and make anything good. Like, you can. There's always a point where we can turn around and say, I was doing the wrong thing, and now I want to do the right thing. You're never too far gone for God's mercy. And I've seen that evidence just in my own life and in the lives of so many people.
That's beautiful. I think in Matthew 18, the servant who was forgiven much and didn't realize it didn't show kindness to others. I think when people say that to you and don't show grace, it makes me wonder how much they've experienced and understand the weight of their own sin, or they would rejoice at your life and your faithfulness and your ministry and your conversion. I mean, it's foreign to me that nobody would not celebrate what you were and then became by God's grace. I honestly don't get it unless somebody doesn't really know and experience the gospel. We'll wrap this up. You've been generous with your time, but if there was a woman sitting right here and she had experienced an abortion and is watching this, or a guy who just took his girlfriend or wife to have an abortion and didn't do what he now sees as the right thing, what would you say?
I would say choose the present. I actually just got this yesterday from a woman I know who had an abortion, and she watched Unplanned. She actually did not know it was my story, and she put the two and two together and realized, oh my gosh, I know this woman. And she had several abortions and contacted me and said, I can't stop thinking about the what ifs. And my answer to that is always the same. God grants us a gift every day in the here and now, in the present. And that's where he wants us to live. He wants us to live in today with him. I believe that Satan lives in our past, and he wants to remind us every day of what we have done and how we have failed and the choices that we made when we were walking outside of God's will. And he wants us to call us by our sin. He wants to call us by our sin. He wants to remind us of our failures. But that's not who God is. God wants to release us from that bondage. And he wants us to wake up every day and to make a choice to live in the present with him. And, you know, he wants us to take our past and give it to him so that he can turn it into something miraculous and beautiful and glorious. And I remember when I was, kind of in the beginning of all of this, I had to actively make a choice every day. Okay, like, am I going to live in this present that God has given me, in this gift, or am I going to live in my past? And there were some days where I just wallowed in self-loathing, and I took a bath and cried all day and had this pity party, about my life and how terrible it had been and all this, and that was just a completely wasted day. And Satan rejoiced because I did nothing to further the kingdom of God. And that's exactly where Satan wanted me. And eventually I kept choosing God. I kept waking up and I kept choosing God's grace, and I kept choosing God's mercy. And eventually it was like I didn't even have to make the choice, because living in God's mercy, living in his infinite wisdom, living in God's will, living in that light was so good. I couldn't even imagine going back and living in my past. And there's so much freedom in that. There's so much freedom in shaking off those chains. And so that's always what I tell people. Don't live in the what ifs, because you can't go back and change it. Don't live in the past. Don't live in that bondage. Live in the freedom that God is giving you today. Write down what it is that you need to heal from and ask God to heal you from it. And he will. And know that there will not be a point in time where you go, done, healed, like it's over, I no longer have to heal from that. It may be something that you have to live for the rest of your life with, and you're healing on that journey for the rest of your life, but God will be with you every step of the way. And I always say healing is kind of like, it's like a series of bridges, where you have to cross this bridge. You have to, you may take a little step, you may take maybe a little short bridge that you have to cross over to get to this next place of healing. The beautiful thing is, when you're walking in God's will, it's always God's hand reaching out for you.
Amen.
At the end of that bridge, he's always calling. He's always calling with that hand out, saying, I'm right here. I'm right here at the end of this bridge, waiting for you to cross. And that's the beauty. That's the power of forgiveness. That's the power of God's will. And honestly, I think for me, I did a study on the book of First John, and it's my favorite book of the Bible. And it talks a lot about like living in God's will. And if you are a believer, it's a book for believers. And so if you're a believer, I encourage people to like pick up a study or read through First John, because it just talks about the beauty of living in God's will. And it talks about how we ought to act as believers, um, and how we ought to treat one another. And I find that, if you have, I think a lot of people who have abortions, a lot of people who are kind of living with that burden, I think sometimes there's a lot of unforgiveness in our hearts, whether it's for the man who was involved, the abortionist, the people who worked in the clinic. And so I tell people, if you have that sort of unforgiveness in your heart, the best thing you can do is to pray for that person that you're struggling with. It's very hard to feel hatred or anger towards someone who you are consistently and fervently praying for. And so I encourage people to read through First John, do a Bible study on First John. It really does help equip us as Christians, as believers in God. It really does help us understand how we are to live in that light of Christ and how we are to live among one another. And it was really helpful to me in my healing after having had abortions and having worked in the clinic.
I love going to scripture. What good advice. I just gave a sermon this past week on John 14:15 through 17 at my home church about how it's the spirit of truth, and the spirit transforms us inside out through his power, and the spirit is a divine person. Of course, that's discussed some also in First John. So that's a wonderful word. One slight encouragement, if people are telling you every week or two about your, how do you possibly live with yourself? Like, that's just terrible, and I wish people would stop. That is the loud minority you referred to at the beginning. That is just a reminder. But most people, I've had two former abortionists, Catherine Wheeler and Tony Levitino, on here, and the vast majority of Christians celebrate their stories and have grace for their stories. And myself and 99% of the Christians watching this are celebrating with you and want you to just keep speaking the truth, as I know you will, boldly. It's important today as ever. Now, I was planning on spending half this time on your story, half the time on the state of the abortion debate and issues. So, folks, let us know if in due time you want me to invite Abby back and ask her about how is the pro-life movement pivoted? What do we need to do in our post-Roe era? If that conversation is helpful, and if she's kind enough to come back, let us know if you want us to do it. Before you subscribe, before you move away, make sure you hit subscribe. This is a topic we come back to because it's just so important. I also have a show coming up, When Atheists Have Near-Death Experiences. You won't want to miss that one. Make sure you hit subscribe. And if you thought about studying apologetics, we would love to have you at Biola Top School of Theology. We have classes and go in depth on the issue of life and much more. Information below. Abby, thanks for your time. Thanks for boldly sharing your story, and we'll definitely do it again.
Of course, I would love to.